Many times over the history of Yu-Gi-Oh!, a new card or archetype will be added to the game that makes an old card completely broken retroactively. In this list, I'll be going over 10 cards which have the potential to be broken if they get really good support cards or archetypes in the future. And at number 10, we have Rekindling. Rekindling is a spell card with the effect that allows you to special summon as many fire monsters from your graveyard with 200 defense exactly as possible, but then they're banished during the end phase. So if you have 5 fire monsters with exactly 200 defense each, you can just bring them all out with this card, which is not a hard once per turn. It's basically like Soul Charge without any of the downsides. And that's because it only works on a very specific type of monster, fire type monsters with exactly 200 defense, which is actually a lot of them, to be honest. Usually when fire monsters are released, they're generally given 200 defense because of how much support there is for fire monsters with 200 defense. And that's why Rekindling is currently limited. Whenever a questionable card would be put on the ban list back in the day, players would usually ask why that card was put on the ban list when Rekindling was still at 3. Rekindling used to be the go-to card to contrast cards that people thought were unfairly put on the ban list. Because if a card like Rekindling, which is obviously really strong, was still at 3 copies, then why was his other weaker card being banned? The answer to that was because no one was really using Rekindling in any kind of successful meta deck. And honestly, I think that's the only reason it's limited, is because of how much people complained about it when compared to other banned cards. And no one was really surprised when it was limited, because the card was just that strong. But it's not banned. And that's why it's only at number 10 on this list, because it's already restricted in some way. And it's also a very good indication of what kind of cards we'll be talking about in this video. And at number 9, we have Mysterious Triangle. Mysterious Triangle is a quick play spell card, part of the Alien archetype, which has the effect to destroy one monster on the field with an A counter. Then you could special summon any level 4 alien monster from your deck, but it's destroyed during the end phase. So if one of your opponent's cards has an A counter on them, you can destroy that card and then special summon any level 4 alien monster from your deck, both of which are good effects. It's essentially a +1 in card economy, as you get rid of one of your opponent's monsters and get to special summon a monster from your deck, which I might add is one of the best effects that a card can do. It is very rare that a card allows you to special summon something from the deck, and if they do, they usually have heavy limitations to them or restrictions. Now, the reason Mysterious Triangle doesn't see play is because alien decks are kind of a joke. Aliens generally revolve around using A counters on the field, and any deck that uses counters on your opponent's cards has an inherent disadvantage, because cards don't usually stay in the field long enough to keep those counters on them. So if you could just activate Mysterious Triangle to destroy one of your opponent's monsters, and then special summon an alien without requiring any A counters, this card would be insanely good. But since it requires an A counter, it doesn't really see play. If this card were to ever see play in a competitive environment, they would need to release a new set of aliens that had actual good effects, and that could easily distribute A counters on the field. Number 8, YuGiOh Power Jersey. This will be the only equipped card on this list, and its effect is, it can only be equipped to a YuGiOh monster. That monster gains 1000 attack and defense, which, okay, that's neat. An attack booster equipped card isn't the best thing in the world, but it's its next effect that makes this card potentially broken. If the YuGiOh monster battles an opponent's monster, your opponent takes double battle damage, and it can make a second attack in a row. Double battle damage is good. Being able to inflict double battle damage 2 times is even better, and could potentially just straight up win you the game on its own. Say for example, you equip Power Jersey to a YuGiOh monster with 2500 attack. They would have 3500 attack, and if they attacked over 2 of your opponent's monsters with 1500 attack, that's 8000 points of battle damage. It is very easy to OTK your opponent with this card, especially since YuGiOhs have lots of ways to increase their attack powers even further. Now, the reason this card doesn't see play is because YuGiOhs aren't very good, as they have lots of consistency issues, not helped by the fact that they only have one level 4 or lower monster. A majority of YuGiOh monsters are over level 5, and generally, equipped cards don't see play unless they special summon something from the graveyard or further combo plays. Rarely are they used for actual attack damage. but UA Power Jersey is so good that I could totally see it maybe being broken in the future if they release some more good UA monsters to equip it to. Number 7. Feast of the Wild level 5. This card has the effect to special summon 2 level 5 warrior type monsters from your hand and or graveyard, but their effects are negated for the rest of the turn and they cannot attack. So if you have 2 level 5 warrior type monsters in your graveyard, it's basically a monster reborn for 2 cards, and their effects are only negated for 1 turn. So you can use their effects on your next turn if you want to, but usually they're best used for combo plays immediately. This card has the potential to be really good, but currently there aren't really any good level 5 warrior type monsters to use this card with. So while it's a good combo extender, it doesn't really see play for basically not having too many good targets for it. So if there were ever to be a good archetype release in the future that revolved around level 5 warrior type monsters specifically, you can bet this card would see tons of play. And at number 6, we have Emergeroid Call. This is a counter trap card that can only be activated when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated while you control a Roid fusion monster. You can negate that effect and then send all the cards of the same name as that card from that player's deck and extra deck to the graveyard. Not only that, it also has a graveyard effect where you can banish this card from your graveyard to add a Roid monster from your graveyard to your hand. Basically, it just allows you to go +1 off of its graveyard effect. Both of those effects are good. Being able to negate one of anything and then send all copies of that card to the graveyard is a really good counter trap card effect. And its graveyard effect is a really good graveyard effect. This trap card is a whole package. The only problem being is it belongs to the Roid archetype, and that you have to have a Roid fusion monster to actually activate its negate. But really, it's it belonging to the Roid archetype that's the biggest problem. Roids are kind of a joke archetype for being bad, and they did release a new wave of support with Speedroids, but there are no fusion Speedroids, so there's no real reason to play this card with them. And they did release a new wave of support for Roids. This is where this card comes from, as even with how good this card is, the Roid monsters are just not very good, and they need to release either some Speedroid fusion monsters, or just better Roid monsters to make this card be playable, or even potentially broken. Number 5, Tri-White. Tri-White has the effect to special summon 3 monsters from your graveyard, without any other kinds of summoning restrictions for the turn, like with Soul Charge, nor even a once per turn clause. The reason this card doesn't see play is because it only works on level 2 or lower normal monsters. Being able to special summon 3 monsters from the graveyard at once is a really good effect, bordering on broken, but the fact that they're normal monsters severely restricts how useful this card actually is, because playing normal monsters in your deck is something you almost never want to do, because normal monsters are essentially dead cards in your hand, no matter how useful their stats or levels might be. Normal monsters can't do anything on their own, and they need support cards to do everything for them. So usually they make those kinds of support cards really good, like Tri-White allowing you to special summon 3 of them from the graveyard. But there are some effect monsters that treat themselves as normal monsters while in the hand or graveyard, sort of like Gemini monsters or Dragon Spirit of White. So if they were to ever release a series of really good level 2 or lower monsters with effects similar to Dragon Spirit of White, then Tri-White could potentially be really good. Number 4, Photon Alexandra Queen. This is a rank 4 monster that has the effect where you can detach 1 Exceeds material to return all monsters on the field to the hand, then inflict 300 damage to each player for every card returned to the hand. It's essentially a non-destruction, non-targeting board wipe, as it just bounces all of the monster cards on the field back to the hand, which is one of the best ways to get rid of your opponent's monsters, as there's so many cards nowadays that both can't be targeted by effects and have some kind of protection from being destroyed. It even has decent stats on it, even if it does get returned to the extra deck as well with its own effect. Now, the reason this card doesn't see play is because of its summoning requirements. It requires 2 level 4 Butter Spy monsters, and there are only 3 Butter Spy monsters in the game. And only one of them has any kind of swarming effect, where it can special summon itself from your hand if you normal summon a warrior type monster. So their Exceeds monster has a really good effect, it's just there is not enough of the monsters from its archetype, and the ones that do exist aren't very good. So, if they were to ever release a new wave of support for this card, like really good cards, I could totally see this card being held as a big problem. I also don't see something like that happening anytime soon. It's more likely that a new wave of support will be released that allows cards to easily rank up into this card. Kind of like how Azathoth started seeing play when people were able to rank it up during their opponent's turn, despite no one really using the card before then. Number 3, Tachyon Transmigration. This is a counter trap card that can be activated at the end of a chain of cards if you control a Galaxy-Eyes monster, and then it will negate all of the cards in that chain and shuffle them back into the deck. And if you control specifically a card with Galaxy-Eyes Tachyon Dragon in its name, you can activate this card from your hand. Being able to negate all of the cards in a chain is really good, especially since it also just works on one card. You don't have to resolve it at the end of a long chain of cards. Sending all of those negated cards back to the deck is better than destroying them and send them to the graveyard, because most decks use cards from the graveyard as a resource. And having the option to activate this card from your hand is really good. Most of the trap cards that do see play in the current meta see play because they can be activated from the hand. All of its effects are really great, so if this card was part of a good archetype, it would probably have been banned already. And therein lies the problem of why no one uses it. It can only be used in a Galaxy-Eyes deck, and Galaxy-Eyes decks are generally not the best things in the world, at least not on the meta level. And at number 2, we have Machine Duplication. This card has the effect where you can special summon 2 more copies of a machine type monster you control with 500 or less attack. Now, like I mentioned with the Mysterious Triangle card, special summoning monsters from your deck is an incredibly good and very rare effect for cards to have. So a card like Machine Duplication, which can bring out 2 copies, has the potential to be really good, and in fact it has already been abused in the past. There are currently 2 cards limited on the ban list, basically because of Machine Duplication. Whenever a machine type monster is released, if it has less than 500 attack, it has the potential to be broken because of Machine Duplication existing. Bringing out 2 cards from the deck is just an incredibly strong effect, and I'm kind of surprised this card isn't already on the ban list in some way, shape, or form. And at number 1, we have Snake Rain. This is the card which I think has the highest potential to be broken, but currently it sees absolutely no play. That's because there aren't any good reptile type monsters to use it with. Snake Rain has the effect where you can discard 1 card to send 4 specific reptile type monsters from your deck to the graveyard. It's like a Foolish Burial on steroids, except only for reptile type monsters. And Foolish Burial is a card that's so good that it's limited to 1. The only other card in the game that exists that allows you to send 4 specific cards to the graveyard is the banned spell card called Painful Choice, a card commonly held as one of the most broken cards ever made. Except that card also allows you to add 1 card to your hand, and doesn't require you to discard as a cost. Snake Rain is a much more watered down version of Painful Choice, but it does allow you to selectively mill 4 cards from your deck, which is potentially a really good effect. Now, the only problem with this card, as I said earlier, there are no good reptile type archetypes. Pretty much every good reptile type monster is either a one-off in an archetype, or of the few reptile archetypes that do exist, they're all basically gimmicks. Reptiles are one of the least represented types of monsters in the game, and that's why Snake Rain has existed for as long as it has without any problems. It is like the poster boy of a card which has the potential to be incredibly broken, but currently there aren't enough good reptile type monsters with graveyard effects that exist in the game, yet. And that's why I think it's a perfect spot for the number 1 on this list. Alright, and that's the end of the list. If you know of any other cards that are potentially broken and should have made this list, or have ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.